Hey guys, welcome back to the second part of our first edition of Common's Corner. We were talking about the difference between a waste spark setup or a distributed ignition system on my 2010 Chrysler Town and Country. I'm going to compare that to a coil on plug for a 2012 Jeep Patriot. Just a refresher from the first edition. Let's get out and take a look real quick. All right, just going to come around and take a look as a refresher for the people that didn't watch all of it on the first part. All right, if you remember from the first edition, we looked at the coil setup for a distributed ignition system with the waste spark ignition. All right, remember we said we've got 3 individual coils in one pack. Our secondary wire is here, and our primaries are located back over here underneath. All right, this connector right here. We talked about the 4 wires going into it. So the one is the power wire where we're spliced inside and giving power to each one of the primaries. Right, we got 3 individual coils there. Each one will get power. All right, and then we have 1 wire, which is the control wire, going to the driver on the setup. All right, the NPN transistor in the powertrain control module. All right, so what happens is when we supply battery voltage to it, we turn the ignition to the run. We supply voltage to each one of our coils, 1, 2, 3. All right, and then once we start cranking the vehicle, we'll get our signal from our crankshaft position sensor and our camshaft position sensors, and the computer will know to start sequencing and firing the cylinders, or basically providing the spark to ignite the air fuel mixture. All right, so we took a look at the secondary wires, right? The wires going down to the spark plugs. And remember, we took a look inside at the inside of the wire so we could see the metal terminal in there that attaches to the spark plug. And there's our spark plug down for each cylinder. You can see we got a 6-cylinder, so we got the 3 on the front bank here, and the other 3 are on the back bank over there. Okay, so, and then in the first video we talked about the visual inspection, what to look for. We look for on the secondaries, we're always looking for those burn marks where the wires are near each other, or down here where it's getting near hot surfaces or anything sharp. Okay, when we're inspecting the primaries, I didn't do that on this one. We'll take a look at it on the next car, and what we should look for on our primary inspection, on a visual inspection. All right, so what we're looking at here is our distributed ignition system using the waste spark method. All right, so each one of these cylinders right here are paired. So if you look, we've got 3 individual coils. Each one of these are paired up with their sister or companion cylinders. So these 2 cylinders are coming up to top dead center on the same time. One's on the compression stroke, the other one is on the exhaust stroke. All right, remember that's why it got its name, the waste spark. We're wasting spark on an exhaust stroke. Okay, so we call it the waste spark setup, which most people just refer to it by that nowadays. All right, and then remember, we're using the block as a conductor. So we're going to fire 1 cylinder. All right, it's going to travel through the block. It's going to fire the other cylinder, which is in the back bank over there, and then it's going to return to the coil. All right, so remember, 1 spark plug's firing in forward polarity. All right, center electrode to side electrode. All right, through the block, it's going to fire from the ground electrode to the center electrode, and then return back to the coil. Okay, so those 2 cylinders are firing at the same time. Next, we'll take a walk over and we'll look at a 2012 Jeep Patriot that's using a coil on plug system, and we'll look at some of the differences and what we want to inspect on that. So let's take a walk over and take a look. Okay, all right, I'm standing in front of the 2012 Jeep Patriot, and we're just gonna pull the cover off real quick. I did this a little bit in advance so I didn't have to struggle with one hand as we did it. All right, we've taken the cover off, put that down. All right, we're going to put it down to the side so nobody steps on it. Okay, and now we're going to look at a coil on plug setup. All right, so there goes our typical coil on plug. We're looking at a 4-cylinder. All right, so this is our direct ignition. We've got 1 coil for each cylinder. Okay, we're just going to take one off and take a look at what we should be looking at. First thing we want to do is we're going to disconnect the primary wire. All right, remember the primary is the control circuit, and we're just going to take a look in there. And if you can see, it's a 3-pin connector. okay, with only 2 pins being used. We'll get into the wiring later on. We get into some wiring diagrams and stuff like that. One of the things I want to look at on my primary inspection is I want to just make sure that those pins don't look like they're pushed back off their seat. I don't notice any signs of corrosion or water invading, intrusion into there. Okay, so it's nice and dry. Pins are not knocked back. No signs of corrosion. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to remove one of the coils. Okay, so bear with me here. Kind of doing this one-handed. And I have a very long extension because that's all I can get out of my box right now. All right, and all we're going to do is we're going to remove, it's on a wobbler extension, no less. All right, we're just going to remove the mounting bolt. All right, do this one-handed without dropping it. Okay. Now we're going to just kind of the same thing. We want to just twist a little bit, make sure that we break the bond between the boot and the porcelain. Remember, a typical tune-up nowadays is 100,000 miles. And the last thing I want to do is rip everything apart. Obviously, if it's 100,000 miles on something that I'm going to replace in the parts anyway, I wouldn't be caring as much, you might say, but I still don't want to make it difficult for me to remove the spark plug. So in other words, if the boot, the bottom of the boot breaks and rips off and I just pull it out and I have some of that boot stuck on the spark plug, it's going to make it difficult for me to get a spark plug socket on there and remove the spark plug. All right, so let's take a look at what we would look at. We're going to pull that out. First thing we're going to take a look at, all right, we're going to just take a look at the pins. We'll make sure that the pins are straight. Again, there's no signs of corrosion in there, no signs of water intrusion. Okay, so there goes a typical, I'm going to place it here for a little better shot, typical coil on plug setup that we just pulled out of the car. Okay, this one uses a very short boot, as you can see right there. This is the boot section of it. All right, so that's making the connection from the secondary tower, which is inside the coil on plug. All right, so that is my primary. Like we said, we looked at the primary connection. The secondary is just coming over here. That little bit of staining that you see on there is caused by some dielectric grease that was put on there. All right, the dielectric grease eases in the removal of the coil from the spark plug without tearing it or getting stuck on there. All right, and it also helps to fill some of the voids on the spark plug ribs. All right, and keeps it in an attempt to keep what's called flashover, the voltage jumping down the side of the spark plug to the shell of the spark plug and going to ground, rather than going through the spark plug and jumping to ground through the air gap. Okay, when we're inspecting it, same thing. We want to just take a look. We want to make sure that there's no burn marks on it. All right, same as on a spark plug wire. All right, I want to make sure that I don't see any white burn marks, any signs of intrusion, any signs of leakage where the voltage has been jumping to ground inside the tower. Likewise, I want to take a look at and note any kind of oil on this section here. Okay, if I'm leaking oil from the spark weld seals, right, which is the seal going around the spark weld tube, okay, if I'm leaking there, all right, that would involve replacing the valve cover gasket, removing the valve cover gasket and replacing the seal there. Okay, that oil would be evident on the outside of the boot. Okay, not on the inside. We're not talking about oil getting inside the cylinder. We're talking about it getting in the spark weld tube where the spark plug is located, and you can see the spark plug is down there inside the tube. All right, if the seal leaks, then we're going to fill that tube up with oil, and what that oil will do is actually start to weaken or soften the rubber on the boot on the coil. All right, likewise, we might run into a misfire condition on that. All right, so anytime that happens, we want to make sure that we are not just replacing a boot because it got soft and spongy because it's stuck in got sitting in the oil there. We want to make sure we correct that problem as well. So we would have to replace that seal underneath there, okay, as well as replace the boot if it's serviceable. If it's a non-serviceable boot, which some coil on plugs are, then I'm going to have to replace the whole coil. Okay, best cheapest way to do it would replace the boot itself. This system uses a little different than what we some of the cylinders that some of the setups that use a longer boot. All right, usually we'll have a spring, something like this, that makes the connection from the top down to the bottom. A lot of times if I split it open, it's going to be hard to do with one hand here. If I split that apart, kind of hard to see. But if you look onto the right where I stretched it out a little bit between my fingers, you can see it's hard to really see it on the video. There's a little kind of like a metal slug in there that helps add resistance in the circuit as well. So after we've done our visual inspection, all right, we can go ahead and put everything back together, and then we can make the call. Obviously, if I was inspecting for a tune-up, we'd pull the plug out and inspect that as well. But there you go. Basic difference between the coil-on plug setup, all right, and a distributor setup using the waste spark coil, double-ended coil using the waste spark method. Hope that helped a little bit, clarify some of the stuff we've been going over in class the last couple of days. More to come. Stay tuned. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe.